Hey everybody, welcome again to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and welcome back once again to our SpongeBob mini-series, if you will. If you're new to us here, we've been going over the first three seasons of SpongeBob, and we will wrap up with the first movie, where the series was originally supposed to come to a close. Over the last few weeks, we've covered seasons 1 and 2, and last week, we got through the first half of season 3, so at the very least today, we're looking to do the other half of season 3.
Yeah, and that's where we'll begin. The late half, whatever, of season 3.
Yep, and it starts off with a special, actually, because a lot of SpongeBob episodes, they're split into two separate, I like to call those split things episodes, and then for them it's usually like season 3 episode 12A or 12B. In any case, it starts off with a special called SpongeBob's House Party, otherwise known as Party Pooper Pants. And in this episode, SpongeBob decides, just for the heck of it, he's going to throw a party after finding a kit to set one up in a grocery store. The main issue from this episode comes from how he likes to do everything literally by the book. Like, he wants to do it exactly as the guide says. If even one little thing is slightly off, he starts to lose his mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it seems to be kind of a recurring theme in, like some shows are like where they're like reading a magazine and says, this is the way to do this, and they can't get it right or whatever, or it doesn't have the result they hope for or something.
And this episode does have somewhat of a relatable aspect to me in the whole trying to stick to a schedule thing. Granted, I am not nearly as particular as he is in this episode, but generally speaking, if I know what the schedule is, if I can help it, I like to stick to it. If things change at the last minute, yeah, I'm a little bothered by it, so I can definitely relate there. But again, I don't go to the lengths that SpongeBob does. He even, when people are just having a good time, it throws him off because it's not part of the schedule. So he'll have them all sit on a bench while he describes a comic, and eventually he tries to break into his own house after getting locked out.
Yeah. There is a similar story in one of the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh TV episodes where Rabbit has got this schedule that he, really hardcore, is trying to enforce. No exceptions, no breathing room. This is when this is supposed to happen, and he's really crazy about it.
And it just goes to show that it is okay to have a little breathing room, if you will. If something doesn't go exactly as planned, but things are still okay, then no reason to throw a fuss over it. Yeah. And if people are just having a good time, no reason to disrupt that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, by the end of the episode, they're all telling him how great of a party it was, so technically he succeeded.
Yeah.
And then we jump to Season 3, Episode 12. This one is probably one of the most popular episodes out there, all because of one word, which we'll get to. But it is chocolate with nuts.
Yeah.
In this particular episode, SpongeBob and Patrick hear from Squidward about what entrepreneurs are and how they can make a lot of money just by selling random things to people. So they decide, okay, let's go the traditional route and sell chocolate bars. And it, at first, does not go well at all.
I think at the beginning, like SpongeBob sees an ad for something in a magazine or something, and that kind of gives him the motivation to kind of try to find some way to make money.
Yeah, he was looking through his mail, saw a magazine for people living a fancy life, which I guess turns out to be Squidward, because the magazine turns out to be Squidward because he comes by accusing them of stealing his mail. They then ask him how people like that get so much money, and he tells them about entrepreneurs. And, of course, them being ecstatic about it, they're like, okay, we'll do that. Their first customer they ever have is one of the most infamous. And again, it's because of the one word. Because when they first ask him if he wants some chocolate, he's like, oh, chocolate? Did you say chocolate? And when they ask him if he wants nuts or not, all of a sudden chocolate is like the one word he keeps screaming at the top of his lungs, chasing after them for the rest of the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the same guy who you usually hear say, my leg? Fred? Yeah.
Yep. I believe Mr. Lawrence is the voice actor behind them, who also is the voice for Plankton.
Right.
Well, a lot of times if you hear one of those characters scream and it sounds like Plankton, it's probably him.
Yeah.
So then they come across another guy who seems decent, but it turns out he's got his own little get-rich-quick scheme that he keeps exploiting them for. They run into him twice, back-to-back, and then eventually they start trying to think of new tactics, because nothing seems to be working. So then, in one of my favorite moments of the episode with how random it is, SpongeBob says, let's flatter the customer, let's make him feel good. The customer opens the door and Patrick just goes, I love you. And he just slams the door on him.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's also SpongeBob telling him that they really need to focus. So Patrick takes it so literally that he keeps on stretching his eyeballs, focusing on the guy in front of him, even after the door gets shut on him. But I think the other most well-known moment is after they come across this elderly woman, and they jokingly say, oh, is your mother home? Trying to flatter her. But it turns out her mom is actually home, and she's basically a spine with a moving face.
Yeah, I've only seen it maybe once a long time ago, so my memory of it is honestly blurry. But but I imagine it is pretty funny.
Oh, it definitely is. For those that have not seen this episode, either recently or at all, highly recommend it. It's another one of those top-rated episodes, and to me, for good reason. So they keep trying different tactics, and then eventually they settle on just lying for one reason or another, and they come up with these exaggerated things of what the chocolate would do for each person. And it's always different, but it seems to work for a while. And then they come across who they think is a very injured man. But it turns out it's the guy that was conning them earlier. And finally, when they think they're just about to give up, the guy that was screaming the word chocolate over and over shows up, and all of a sudden, he kind of just stops screaming and goes, I'd like to buy all your chocolate.
Yeah.
So they're just instantly rich. And I won't say what they end up spending the money on, but it is kind of a good payoff to some degree. But overall, very solid episode. Honestly, definitely one of the most popular ones that I hear people discuss or quoting, aside from ones like maybe Band Geeks.
Right.
But yeah, if you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out. But then part 2 of Season 3, Episode 12 is the 5th Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episode. And the plot for this one is that Barnacle Boy starts getting tired of how he's being treated like a baby compared to everybody else. So he decides he's going to be a bad guy to convince Mermaid Man that he's not a child. And I think this is the episode where the whole "every villain is Lemons" evil acronym comes from. And what I like about this particular episode is that it helps introduce kind of their version of the Avengers, but I think based on their group name, which is something like the International Justice League of Super Acquaintances, which of course kind of references the Justice League just by name, but I think it also is a reference to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And there's a team of 5 of them, while Barnacle Boy, now called Barnacle Man, teams up with a couple of the other villains, and there's a big face-off, if you will, but it's mostly just the heroes not really using their powers very well.
Yeah, and they utilize like several major players in this one. Like Squidward has got like some volcanic power or something. Sandy has the power of invisibility, and forget what exactly everybody has.
Well, SpongeBob is known as the Quickster, and he's like the super speed character of the group. Patrick is like Mr. Fantastic in that he can stretch his limbs to a ridiculous degree. And then I believe the 5th one was just Mermaid Man. But yeah, Sandy was disappearing, and Squidward had a volcano on his head that supposedly isn't quite like the Hulk necessarily, but it does have to do with, as they put it, getting him angry and then he erupts, literally.
Right.
But when they get to the battle, it pretty much backfires immediately. So when the villains basically win, Barnacle Boy, turns out, isn't necessarily evil. He was just using it as leverage in order to be treated the way he wants to be treated, which is as an adult. And it does pay off. Mermaid Man goes along with it. Everybody's happy for him. One little fun joke near the beginning, right as Barnacle Boy declares that he's going to be evil, is that he's standing on one side of the Krusty Krab and he goes, "I'm turning over to the dark side." And then it pans out to show that half of the Krusty Krab is in complete darkness. And Mr. Krabs just goes, "Why should I bother lighting the whole store?"
Right. Yeah. Because he's cheap. We know that.
Oh yeah, even though in most episodes he doesn't have the lighting in that building set up like that. It was more just for a one-time visual gag.
Yeah.
But then Season 3, Episode 13, starting with New Student Starfish. This is another one that is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine because of one particular joke that even if most people haven't seen the whole episode know of, but the basic premise is that SpongeBob and Patrick at the beginning realize just how much they miss each other when SpongeBob goes off to work or school, boating school in this case. So Patrick decides to tag along. And immediately after SpongeBob gives him a tour and class begins, things just start going wrong for SpongeBob and they stop getting along for a little bit. And the moment that most people refer to in this episode comes after Patrick tries to introduce himself, and all he says is 24 out of nervousness. But then that quickly becomes a running joke for SpongeBob and Patrick. And that's the moment that most people quote. In fact, I remember when I turned 24, we definitely used that reference in my family. And then the following year when I turned 25, my family was like, "I thought of something funnier than you turning 24. Let me hear it." Turning 25.
Yeah. Yeah. I do remember seeing this at least once, and yeah, it's perhaps has one of the darkest turns in the show's history because, because now SpongeBob and Patrick are in an unusual conflict with each other, and things are things get really dark and just really really aggressive for a while. So yeah, it's definitely a unique one.
Yeah, they get into some tropes, like them being in the hallway and everyone around them is just going, fight, 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 fight. And when they do start fighting, quote unquote, the camera quickly pans out to show that they're not even touching each other.
No.
And everybody walks away, so they get put in detention. And they start getting along again after the egg that's in the classroom suddenly loses the light above them, which could lead to them freezing to death. So they end up working together and they get along again. And after Patrick realizes that it's a boating school, he thought it was something else entirely, so he leaves. And then the episode ends with the bird hatching out of the egg. And then, part 2 is an episode called Clams. And by the title card, as well as the music playing when the episode starts, you can tell that they took heavy inspiration from the movie Jaws. In this particular case, Mr. Krabs makes his $1 millionth dollar. So to celebrate, he takes SpongeBob and Squidward on a supposed trip. They don't know where they're going at first, but then it turns out he's just taking them clam fishing, much to Squidward's dismay for sure. At one point, though, SpongeBob hooks Mr. Krabs' millionth dollar, which was attached to him, and gets it into the water, still attached to the hook. And then you hear the parody of the Jaws theme playing, which apparently anytime that song plays, a giant clam, which is their version of the shark from Jaws, starts to approach. I don't know if this is another one that you haven't seen in a while, or
I never have, honestly.
Oh, you've never seen this one? Okay. Well, I don't want to give away too much then, but after the clam ends up eating the millionth dollar, Mr. Krabs goes to extreme lengths, even trying to guilt trip his employees to stay there with him until they get it back. But you can definitely tell at times when they take inspiration from Jaws. Okay, and then Season 3, Episode 14, this is another one of their specials. And I think this was probably my favorite episode as a kid. I wasn't entirely sure why, but it was definitely one that my sister and I, in particular, would reference a lot, especially with just some of the caveman gibberish they were saying. But it's called SpongeBob BC, and for them, it stands for Before Comedy. So they go back to a long time ago, a prehistoric version of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. Everything's set up the same, just in a prehistoric fashion. And they learn about how fire works, and they start to cook things, but then they fight over the fire that they made. They trip each other, they bite each other, they just go all primal. And the live action parts that have Patchy eventually have him going up against his parrot to be like, is the past better or is the future better? And they end up coming to an agreement after their respective props, which were a robot and a caveman, come up with, honestly, a really catchy song. And it turns out, when I looked this up later, the caveman, if you pay attention to his voice, is played by the guy who voices Patrick.
Yep.
Yeah,
And the
definitely.
parrot is also voiced by the late Steven Hillenburg, who created the series.
He voiced the parrot?
Yeah.
Oh. I honestly was not aware of that. Huh, the more you know. But yeah, one of my favorites as a kid. Not my all-time favorite now, but it's still a good one to go back to every once in a while. And then, Season 3, Episode 15. The Great Snail Race is Part 1. And this definitely has a fair share of memes, for sure. But what ends up happening is Squidward gets his own snail and says he's going to enter her in the Great Snail Race, which I think they say happens once every year or something like that. So SpongeBob and Patrick decide to enter as well. SpongeBob already has a snail, of course, with Gary, who he ends up pushing way too hard. Patrick, on the other hand, is like, hey, check out my new snail. But all it is a rock.
He's got nerves of steel.
And I love how they start not necessarily trash talking each other, but Squidward is like telling SpongeBob, "Oh, your snail has no chance against mine." Patrick appears in the window above him and starts saying, "Oh, you guys are forgetting who the real winner will be. My snail." Patrick, that's a rock. And then of course he says again, he's got nerves of steel. And Squidward goes, hey, wait, what are you standing on anyway? And it pans to outside where Patrick is actually standing on Squidward's shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of time I would probably side with Squidward, but probably not in this episode because, it feels to me like Squidward is putting Gary down like completely unprovoked. There's not even a legitimate reason for it. And and I feel like that motivated SpongeBob to really push Gary to win this thing, and maybe even prove Squidward wrong.
Yeah, there's definitely expectations of people in competitions getting cocky, sometimes throwing some trash talk out there. Usually it's in good fun, but some people will take it way too seriously, which both of them did in different ways. Like, of course, Squidward was just, as you said, put him and Gary down. SpongeBob took that challenge way too seriously and overworked Gary to the point of exhaustion, and later on, exploding. So when the actual event comes, they have this kind of Olympic torch thing going on where a previous champion comes to light the torch. The problem is he's also a snail, and a very old snail. So as the time cards go 2.5 hours later, the announcer at the event goes, "He's almost a quarter of the way there."
Yeah. And they say he was the champion of the very first running of this race, too. So.
And I can't remember if they said how many years it'd been going on since then.
Yeah.
But the mayor just is like, forget this. So he goes over, picks up the snail, lights the torch.
Yeah.
And you'd think with how big an event this supposedly is, especially given the size of the crowd, there would be more competitors, but it really is just SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward.
Yeah.
The three of them start the race. Squidward's snail seems to be doing just fine. Gary is exhausted, so he doesn't move. And Patrick's is a rock, so he doesn't move either. Eventually, Gary does start moving, but he's not doing too good, and he starts to lose control, crashes into the wall. And despite what Squidward was teaching the snail, this snail actually turns around before it crosses the finish line to make Gary feel better. And then it just cuts to Patrick's rock at the finish line. And you're just left wondering, how?
Yeah, how'd he get there?
It's like one of those comedic suspensions of disbelief where you can kind of draw your own conclusion. Like, maybe it is a snail. Maybe it moved when no one was looking. Maybe it somehow is sentient.
Yeah.
But that's part of the reason why it's so funny, because it's so random. And there really is no one logical answer that you can basically decide for yourself how that happened.
Yeah.
But, Patrick, this is one of those times where you gotta applaud Patrick, because even though he's kind of a dunce in many respects, he knew how much Squidward wanted to win, so he had the trophy engraved to him, even if he got the last name wrong.
Right.
But it's like Patrick was a good sport the whole time. Like, even when he was kind of trash talking the other two, he wasn't being hurtful necessarily. He was just trying to be like, "You guys are forgetting that my snail will win."
Yeah.
And then when he did, he wasn't getting in their faces about it.
Yeah. That's like, or even when Rocky wasn't moving, he's like, "That's okay. You can go when you want to."
He is strangely patient, isn't he? Because
Yeah.
in a previous episode that we talked about, where Squidward moves into a village full of other people like him, Patrick's looking around like, "Are you Squidward?" Eventually gets to a fire hydrant, and he just goes, "That's okay, take your time."
Yeah.
Then part 2 of season 3, episode 15, is Midlife Crustacean, and I think this is the other of the 2 episodes that are banned. Sailor Mouth was the other one. And we'll get to why it was banned in a little bit, but the plot of this episode is that Mr. Krabs is starting to feel old. Like, he's like, yeah, I'm getting up there in age, so he's not as relevant, or he's not as cool as he would like to be. So when he hears that SpongeBob and Patrick are going out later to have some fun, he decides, hey, if I join them, maybe I'll feel young again.
Yeah. And their idea of fun apparently involves, like, watching clothes go round and round in a laundromat, playing with little kids in, like, a daycare or something, and riding stick horses or something. Not exactly Mr. Krabs' idea of fun, and honestly, not mine either.
Yeah, they do very basic things. Like, they even sit in a kiddie pool. I think they play their own version of D&D at one point, with SpongeBob speaking in a medieval, like, voice. Eventually, when Mr. when Mr. Krabs is about to call it quits, they reveal that they have one more idea up their sleeve, and this idea is what got the episode banned on streaming services, where they go into people's houses and steal certain articles of clothing.
Yeah.
And if I had to guess, they banned this episode to keep from encouraging other people to pull the same stunt.
Yeah. Yeah, Nickelodeon has seemingly had a history of really pushing the boundaries of like of what kind of content they put on a little too far, with some stuff that is a little teetering on adult level, to put it delicately.
Yeah, for sure. Like, they have a good example of that is Ren and Stimpy, where they have way too many adult jokes, in my opinion, from what I've seen. SpongeBob definitely has them too. They're usually more subtle. But yeah, this is one of the ones that was a lot more obvious about it. Like, they weren't trying to hide how weird it was. Now, in this particular case, when they go to do it, it backfires, because the first house they go into happens to be the house of Mr. Krabs' mother.
Yeah, who quickly busts him.
And SpongeBob and Patrick do get out of there, but Mr. Krabs ain't so lucky.
Yeah. He gets sent to his room, even though he technically doesn't live there anymore. It's like he's still a kid.
He even says right before the episode ends, at least I feel younger, and it shows him sleeping in a bed shaped like a race car.
Yeah.
So technically, he got his wish, just not in the way he would have liked.
Yeah.
And in a similar fashion, this next episode with Season 3, Episode 16 also centers around Mr. Krabs. This one called Born Again Krabs. And for this one, this is probably the episode that has one of Mr. Krabs' lowest moments, especially when it comes to how he treats his employees and his overall cheapness. Because that's a big plot in this episode. He eats a spoiled patty, gets sent to the hospital, and he almost gets taken away by the Flying Dutchman to Davy Jones' locker. But he asks for one more chance, saying that he promises to always be generous and never cheap. And at first it seems to be working well, but then it all goes spiraling back downhill just as fast.
Yeah.
Is this another one you haven't seen, Seth?
Yeah, it isn't.
Okay, so I'll talk about it more then. By the way, for the viewers at home, if I pause like that, it's usually just so I'm not talking too much and I try to let Seth take over. He has something to say.
Yeah.
So he starts acting really generous. He even has, he's pampering Squidward, basically catering to anything he wants. He has an in-restaurant movie for one of the customers. And it's even when he realizes he's $10,000 in debt, he's like, oh, he's all right. He's going to be fine. But when SpongeBob and Squidward start to get concerned, they find out from him that he thinks he's still dreaming. But then, after they reveal to him, no, this is not a dream, this is real, he snaps and basically takes everything back from the customers, including somehow making the person who was watching the movie unwatch it. Like the footage leaves his eyes and goes back to the screen. Not sure how that would work, but it could be done there, and it could be like, yeah, this is one of the cheapest he's ever been. But he takes it a step further. Because after he starts acting like this and the Flying Dutchman comes back, SpongeBob stands up for him and says, oh, he's the most generous boss I've ever had, or something to that effect. So then the Flying Dutchman makes a bet with him, saying he'd sell your soul for a couple of bucks. So SpongeBob takes that bet, and the Flying Dutchman goes, Eugene, I'll let you stay, but help me settle a bet. If you had to choose between SpongeBob and all the money I have in my pocket, which would you take? Now, a decent person would immediately say they take their employee. But Mr. Krabs starts off by saying, that depends. How much money are we talking about? The Flying Dutchman then reveals he has 62 cents in his pocket, and he takes the money. He literally sells SpongeBob's soul for no reason for 62 cents, despite the fact that he had just stood up for him.
Oh, yeah.
And this is one of those moments where you really hate Mr. Krabs, but then you also really like Squidward. Because even Squidward's like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but how could you sell his soul for 62 cents? He stuck up for you and you sold him out. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Oh, yeah. He is more of a voice of reason, I think Squidward is, than I think he's often given credit for. Like, Squidward is like the first to acknowledge by far that Mr. Krabs is cheap and manipulative and looking out for number one pretty much all the time. And SpongeBob is, for the most part, oblivious to that, naive, but I think I like that about Squidward. He is that voice of reason who sees the truth and will call it out.
Yeah, that's something about Squidward that I definitely appreciate because I feel like if he wasn't the voice of reason and wasn't like the serious guy a good chunk of the time, then this show in general might come across as way too zany because there aren't too many serious people to balance it out. And I know we've discussed before how when you're a kid, you usually like SpongeBob and Patrick and then just don't really like Squidward because he's always a big, grumpy, mean person.
Yeah.
But a lot of us have found that after we grow up, we've grown to respect Squidward.
Yeah.
It's like we get where he's coming from. We understand why he's the voice of reason because everyone else around him is a nut job.
Yeah.
But no, this definitely caused a lot of people, especially for this episode, to really hate Mr. Krabs and love Squidward. They definitely like SpongeBob too for sticking up for him, but that whole sequence, it's like, wow, Squidward standing up for SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs sold his soul away for a very low amount of money.
Yeah, like Esau trading his birthright for one little meal.
That's kind of similar, yeah, now that you mention it. It's like some people, they just get so desperate for something that they don't care what they have to do in order to get it.
Yeah.
In Mr. Krabs' case, it's of course money. But then we get to part 2 of episode 16, I Had an Accident. And this is an episode where SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy are all sledding, if you will, but instead of snow, they have sand. And SpongeBob is doing a bunch of tricks, but then he falls from a great height and breaks the lower half of his body, completely shattering it. And in this sequence is another one of those very quotable moments from Patrick, where Sandy's like, SpongeBob, land on your bottom. Like this? No, your other bottom. Don't you have to be stupid somewhere else? Not until 4.
Yeah. Yeah, the sand course, it kind of reminds me of the hill that in the winter in my suburb, people like families with little kids like to go for sledding. And there are a couple or so like big bumps. If you go over them just right, will send you airborne. If which is great if you're brave enough. But yeah. And I do remember back was the '05 Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, which is kind of like the Nickelodeon version of the Oscars, when they were listing the nominees for the favorite cartoon award. This was the clip. There was a clip from this episode that they used when they got to SpongeBob on the list.
I imagine that SpongeBob has won a few times, especially considering how long he's been around.
Oh yeah, and he did win that year. He's won, I think, like a bunch of times in a row, I believe.
That does not surprise me, considering from what I've seen, for the longest time, SpongeBob has basically been Nickelodeon's cash cow.
Yeah.
But after this injury happens, and he gets fixed up by the doctor, SpongeBob makes a vow that he's never going to go outside again in fear that he'll hurt himself even further.
Because the doctor warns him if he gets another injury like that, he would get like basically the posterior equivalent of an iron lung, which they call the iron butt, of course.
It's like they have to put a comedic spin on it somehow. So throughout most of the rest of the episode, Sandy and Patrick try different tactics to convince him to come outside, usually by showing these different fun activities you can do. So when they start putting this plan together, he's like, we'll come up with something so fun, he'll want to come outside. And Patrick just goes, and that's when I punch him, right? So they start listing things like Ferris wheels, trampolines, ice cream, 2 ice creams, still 2 ice creams.
Yeah. Washing an old person.
Patrick, that's not fun. But of course the old man is like, it is for me! So eventually what they decide to do is stage an attack where Patrick is dressed as a gorilla and tries to go after Sandy. SpongeBob, of course, sees right through this until another Patrick shows up. So everybody gets confused. Patrick is like, I thought I was doing a good job. But they're like, if you're Patrick, then who's that? And the second Patrick unzips himself, and out comes not just a gorilla, but like a very obvious standing in front of a green screen guy in a gorilla costume. And he actually does attack both Patrick and Sandy, and with very little choice left, SpongeBob does come outside, trying to find a way to save his friends, which does not go well because he immediately gets ripped in half. But then he's just like, I just have one question. What's a gorilla doing underwater to begin with? And the gorilla's like, oh, well, George, they're on to us. And then out comes what I believe is supposed to be like a horse or a zebra or something, which is one of those like two-piece human costumes where somebody's the head of the animal and somebody's the back of the animal. The gorilla hops on them, they ride off into the sunset, and it ends with a family watching that same episode, and they have the same reaction as everybody else, like, what did we just see? Like that ending has basically no explanation, which again is why it's so funny. Because it's one of those things that comes out of left field, and you're just sitting there like, what is going on?
Yeah. With a little self-awareness humor in there.
Oh yeah, that is something that SpongeBob, the series in general, is good at. Is usually they won't stick to a form of logic unless it's for a joke. Like one of the most infamous ones is how they constantly have these intense fires even though they're underwater.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they don't acknowledge it. But in an example like the episode where they steal the balloon,
right.
Patrick is like, hey, if we're underwater, how can there be a... And the fire goes out. So a good chunk of the time, logic doesn't apply unless they specifically point it out. But then we get to Season 3, Episode 17. Part 1 is Krabby Land, where Mr. Krabs tries to make an amusement park of sorts out of just some random garbage. He hypes it up for a bunch of kids because he thinks that'll get a bunch of kids in there since it's summertime. So a bunch of kids will be running around with a lot of money, so he wants to rope them in. When he reveals it, it is awful. Like, things are already falling apart. Even when a kid tries to get on the slide, there's just a bunch of hoses hanging from a piece of bamboo, toasters attached to springs like those little rocking horse things you'll see on some playgrounds. It does not go well at all. But then Mr. Krabs promises them that eventually Krabby the Clown will show up.
Yeah, and the story reminded me of how the Disneyland park in California got started, which just celebrated its 70th anniversary, or turned 70 years old last year, by the way. And basically, Walt Disney had this sort of idea to create a place where people could come and be entertained near his studio. And that was kind of the idea initially behind the park. Mm-hmm. But the description of this Krabby Land sounds closer to Action Park, if you saw the documentary Class Action Park.
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff about that place.
Yeah. And my dad said he visited it once and got a pretty bad abrasion or something. Basically, for those who don't know, Action Park was a park in New Jersey that infamously had some poorly designed attractions, water rides, but it was kind of on purpose because of like the daredevil culture that was prevalent. But some people got killed, a bunch of people got badly hurt.
Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't shut down sooner than it did, even though it was still kind of quick. But yeah, they definitely cut some corners from what I saw. Of course, some people, as you said, got badly hurt, even lost their lives. And it's like, I don't even know how they got as far as they did. Because there's usually a lot of security checks and a lot of safety checks as things are being built in order to make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
But now that they got far enough to the point where they had people trying out their rides, and it did not go well.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Krabs, if he could build an amusement park that big, he would definitely probably set it up that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But he did like a small scale one that he could put together very quickly. And really only one kid was supposedly hurt after he falls off the slide that instantly collapsed, but he wasn't in a cast or anything, I don't think. But eventually, after SpongeBob stalls them for an extended amount of time by constantly hurting himself, since that appears to be the only thing that'll make them laugh, Mr. Krabs finally says, "Hey, Krabby the Clown is here." So when they all go inside to meet him, Mr. Krabs quickly turns around, puts a tie on, puts a tomato that he painted blue on his nose, speaks for about 10 seconds, and then leaves. But then it backfires for him not too long after that, because as he's leaving by going out the window, the kids catch up to him. They get all the money back and they toss it from the roof so all the kids can just catch it and have a good time. And Mr. Krabs ends up getting tortured in similar ways that SpongeBob was when he was stalling for time. And then we jump to what I'm surprised is not considered a top-rated episode on IMDb's website, but it's definitely one of the most popular episodes that I hear people talking about, probably because of the premise, some of the jokes, the song that they have in it, and it's simply titled The Camping Episode. And just by the episode name alone, you know what's going to be happening. Squidward assumes that when he hears that SpongeBob and Patrick are going camping, they're going into a deep forest or something, and he gets excited at the premise of them getting lost. But it turns out they're just camping right outside, and Squidward tries to tell them, it's not camping if you're 10 feet from your house.
Yeah.
So eventually, when SpongeBob says have fun inside, Squidward takes that as a challenge and comes outside to camp with them. For the most part, he isn't as fortunate. Like, he tries to set up a tent and it keeps breaking or collapsing. He tries to get some food, but all they have is marshmallows, which leads to one of my personal favorite gags where SpongeBob and Squidward, they're doing just fine with theirs. Patrick is constantly setting his on fire immediately, and when he tries to blow it out, it hits Squidward in the face. Eventually, he does duck, but somehow it comes back around like a boomerang and hits him in the back of the head. And at this point, it's the song that appears, called the Campfire Song. And it is one of the catchier songs in there. It's probably one of the ones I am humming the most or will play randomly. It is pretty short, but it's very memorable. Like when Patrick starts swaying to the music, he puts his hand on Squidward's head, so he starts doing the same thing. SpongeBob tries to get Squidward to participate, and even though he doesn't, he's still like, good job. And after the song ends, Squidward tries to play a song of his own, and that's when the second plot of the episode, if you will, begins, when they start warning him about the sea bear. So they start warning Squidward about all the things he should not do or say if they don't want the sea bear to show up. Squidward believes it's a myth, so he literally goes and does everything they just said not to do. At first it seems to be fine, but shortly after that, that's when the sea bear shows up.
The campfire song itself is iconic. Even if you haven't seen the episode, there's a good chance that you know the song. And I more recently heard it being used in a SpongeBob ad that was playing recurringly while I was watching Paramount Plus back when we had that.
And the way that song is set up, and the fact that they're singing it around a campfire, it's gotten to the point for me where pretty much any time I'm out with friends at a campfire or a bonfire or something to that effect, at some point I'll just start going, let's gather around the campfire and sing our campfire song. And if people start joining in, I'll keep it going. If not, then I may stop after that.
Of course, yeah.
It's like, when you're at a campfire, at least for me, it's like, I just can't resist the opportunity. That's how stuck in my mind that this song is. But then after the sea bear attacks, Squidward tries multiple things to get away, but they all just make it worse. And when he decides to get in SpongeBob and Patrick's anti-sea bear circle, it does result in the sea bear leaving. And they're like, oh, thank goodness, this never would have kept away a sea rhinoceros. And soon after, there's one just standing there, sitting at them, or staring at them, and that's how the episode ends. It's kind of one of those here we go again endings, but it's not as heavy as some other episodes. It's more like one of those visual gag type things.
It's like a classic, all right, everything's good. Or is it? Twist ending.
Yeah, there we go. That's honestly a better way to put it. It's like, oh, they're all celebrating. It's like, oh, good, the sea bear's gone. Oh, wait, there's another one.
Yeah.
Then Season 3, Episode 18, starting with Missing Identity. And in all honesty, this is one of those episodes from the earlier seasons that I kind of keep forgetting exists. Not because it's bad or anything, but it's not one that I just happen to come back to.
And I never really hear anybody talking about it myself, so I'm not surprised if it, flies out of memories or whatever.
Sure. But for those that have not seen it, which is, from what I can gather, a good chunk of you out there, it starts off with SpongeBob sitting in a very classic-looking diner and just unprovoked starts telling the story of how he lost his identity. And you'd think that would mean that somebody stole his identity, like someone pretended to be him and he lost everything as a result or something. But it turns out, as he tells the story, when he says he's missing his identity, he means he just lost his name tag, which is a problem because Mr. Krabs announces a surprise inspection in the next hour when he goes to do a flashback type thing. And he spends the rest of the episode trying to find it. And with Patrick's help, he eventually does, and it just turns out he apparently just had his shirt backwards. But he gets there on time, and he smells really bad because he was dumpster diving for the thing. But Mr. Krabs says to each of them, if you do this such and such a thing, you will pass. It's a very simple episode, and maybe that's why it isn't as remembered as some of the other ones because it doesn't, from what I remember, have a lot of like high punch jokes or a lot of memorable moments or anything. Kind of the setup at the beginning is cool because it doesn't start off the way it normally does. It's kind of one of those, like, if it was in a black and white filter, it could be one of those film noir things with a detective where somebody's just narrating, sitting at the diner trying to remember, who was that person I ran into the other day?
All right, yeah. Yeah, that's just one of a few times that I've seen animation for kids kind of, or at least, or that I know about in kids animation doing that sort of classic detective parody style. Like there was a time or two Arthur did it, and there was one Rugrats episode that was that played that style with like a candy, and then a couple of short Loud House cartoons I found on YouTube where one of the sisters is investigating something around the house. So yeah, it's one of a few examples of that.
You know, a lot of cartoons, especially around that era, they usually at some point would have at least one episode that takes place in a Western style, one that takes place in a medieval style, maybe some type of spy thing. Like with Arthur, for example, he had an episode where they went to a Renaissance fair, and of course there was a lot of medieval stuff there because it's a Renaissance fair. That's kind of what it's based on. They even have their own sword in the stone thing that Arthur happens to pull out, which allows them to make a King Arthur joke. But yeah, that's just one example of many. In fact, while we probably won't be talking about it in the near future, I believe in the 4th episode there is an episode of, in the 4th season there is an episode of SpongeBob where they go into a medieval setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's further in the future if we get to season 4 at some point. But yeah, this is definitely one of those lesser talked about episodes, and it's not too hard to see why. It still has its moments, though. But then we get to definitely a more popular episode. Still not the most talked about necessarily, but it's still a good one, at least to me. And it's called Plankton's Army. And it's another one of those episodes where, of course, Plankton is trying to steal the formula. And when he tries a couple things, his computer wife tells him maybe he just needs to get some henchmen or people that will do whatever he says. So he's like, wait, one Plankton is not enough. Well, what if we had 100 or 1,000 of them? So when he calls up a bunch of his family, he thinks he's about to have these tough, brawny, super intelligent masterminds that are about to come help him, when pretty much every single one that shows up is like this hillbilly stereotype.
I think, is this the episode where like Plankton's first name is shown like on Karen's screen and they all laugh at him for it?
Yeah, they refer to him as Sheldon, which is when Karen finds out that is in fact Plankton's first name. So while he's making a speech to motivate them to go with him on this plan, the name Sheldon appears on Karen's screen behind him a couple of times, which they start laughing at. And even though Plankton ends up unplugging her until he's done, when he turns away for a second, he's got a piece of paper strapped to his back that just says Sheldon.
Yeah. It's like the new version of Kick Me.
Yeah, basically, that has been a running gag, especially in older shows where somebody might seemingly just be slapping somebody on the back in a congratulatory fashion. It'll just say "kick me" or something to that effect. But Plankton does actually succeed in getting in the vault where the formula supposedly is. He takes it out and he starts reading, but Mr. Krabs keeps warning him, don't do it, don't keep reading. But the book that Plankton is reading says, oh, it'll be like 4 pounds of ground up plankton. He's like, I warned you. So after he sees that, Plankton runs off, book falls to the floor, everyone else in his family eventually runs off. And Squidward goes, Mr. Krabs, is this really part of the formula? He's like, oh, no, I did that to mess with Plankton, which I'm sure he'll figure out eventually. But I've actually got the formula in a safe place that no one will ever think to look. Squidward just goes, let me guess. It's at home, under your mattress. Curse you, Squidward!
No. It's not as well kept a secret as the Colonel's herbs and spices.
Yeah, he's very predictable in that respect, especially with Squidward's logic-based mind. And then, I believe, Season 3, Episode 19 is the final special episode we'll be talking about. And usually when we say special, we mean it's one 20, 30-minute long episode as opposed to 2 episodes split up to about 11 minutes each. And this one is called The Sponge Who Could Fly. Initially referred to as The Lost Episode.
Yeah.
Because Patchy's like, we can't watch The Lost Episode because, well, I lost it. So, at least a good first half of the special is just Patchy trying to find the lost episode. So you don't see a lot of SpongeBob in that first half. But eventually he does find the cassette tape, because, you know, those were still prominent at the time. And when he first puts it in, it just has a couple minutes or so, maybe just even a full minute. I'm not sure how long it goes for. But it's just SpongeBob walking, occasionally changing the way he is walking. But then it shows those rainbow vertical bars on screen. He's like, wait, that's it? That's the lost episode? That was just a bunch of cheap walk cycles. And he snaps and loses it, starting to tear everything down that he owns that is SpongeBob related. And he's like, okay, I'll just leave. And shortly after he leaves, the TV goes, and now the real lost episode, which the parrot is quick to tell him about. And then Patchy has kind of a big, comfy couch moment where he cleans everything up and fast forward, which in this particular case is just the footage of him tearing it down, but backwards.
Yeah.
So then they watch the episode, which starts with SpongeBob saying how he wishes he could be among the jellyfish and soaring through the air. And everyone starts laughing at him, especially when he starts trying multiple things, Wright Brothers style, trying to get into the air. And for a while, it does not work until he accidentally inflates his pants, and that causes him to fly.
So it's kind of like the Nature Pants episode, except this time he's not trying to get away. He's just trying to fly.
The only reason why he's trying to get away is because now that he has this ability to fly, people are taking advantage of this and trying to get him to do all these different tasks for them, which they think for some reason they are owed. So he tries to get away. Eventually, the farmer who he damaged the silo of earlier on comes back and basically blows up the pants. And when he crashes to the ground, the crowd is like, what have we done? We're monsters. And you think they're sympathizing with SpongeBob, but no, they pick up the pants and then they leave. Even holding a funeral for the pants, which they show later on when SpongeBob is like, you don't need wings to fly. And he kind of has a two-parter song in this episode. It's not one of the catchiest, but it's still a good one. And as the episode ends, he comes back to his house, and Patrick says, "Oh, you want to fly over and get a Krabby Patty or something?" And usually when someone says, "Oh, do you want to fly over to such and such a place?" they just mean, "Do you want to head over there, or do you want to move really quickly to get to this other place?" But apparently it's literal, because after Patrick says that, he literally just takes off like Superman, to SpongeBob's disbelief. But then Patchy and the parrot, Potty, they're both like, "Oh, let's watch the episode again." But then he destroys the tape, and he's like, "I guess the lost episode is lost forever now."
Yeah, guess so.
And one thing I kind of wish they did, like, I'm not surprised they didn't, but I think it would have been really funny if they did a callback to the Pretty Patties episode with Patrick's inflatable pants.
Yeah.
If he saw SpongeBob doing it and he's like, "Hey, he stole my idea."
Yeah.
But then we get to the final episode of season 3, called SpongeBob Meets the Strangler, or at least that's part 1. And in this episode, SpongeBob rats somebody out who then gets arrested. And everybody except for him seems to know who he just ratted out. And it turns out this guy is notorious for coming back to seek revenge on anybody who turns him in. So this guy does break out very quickly, even though he was chained up to a ridiculous degree. And he pretends to be SpongeBob's bodyguard for a while until he can get him alone. But unintentionally, SpongeBob keeps stalling, especially after they get back to his house. And a party ensues with a lot of the citizens of Bikini Bottom. They leave. It's like, okay, finally we're alone. And then they hear the doorbell ring, and a second party starts for SpongeBob's birthday. So that lasts for a while as well, and the longer this takes, the crazier this guy gets.
Yeah, I didn't see this one.
It is, again, one of those lesser-known ones, but while it's not a guilty pleasure episode for me, it's still a good one to refer back to every once in a while. And just as this guy finally gets SpongeBob alone, a chain of events happens to drive him crazy from SpongeBob to the point where he turns himself in. And SpongeBob is finally safe, supposedly. But then the final episode of season 3 is Pranks a Lot. A lot of people may remember the episode Fools in April, where there were a few pranks there. But in this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are the ones pulling off the major prank. In this case, they go to a joke store, like a practical joke store, and the newest product that the guy has that they then take with them is a can of invisibility spray. And they use it to make everybody believe that suddenly the town is haunted by ghosts.
Yeah. So, yeah, they go to the joke shop, and they're trying to, figure out what they want to get. And the salesman is making suggestions like, fake vomit? Real vomit?
Yeah.
Like, Is that even legal? That's not a quote, by the way. That's like, that's just kind of my joke.
Yeah, usually if there's real vomit in a store, it's considered a biohazard.
Yeah.
Uh,
But then they kind of decide that they want to maybe spray a bench in the park or at the bus stop, make it look like they're floating. But then they kind of get into a fight about how to use it and wrestle over the can and spray each other with the stuff, and eventually they're completely hidden.
yeah, and in the whole process of them spraying each other, they're delivering a bunch of puns depending on what they just sprayed. Like Patrick spraying SpongeBob's eye, and he goes, "I see what you mean." And eventually gets to the point where the narrator's like, "Several bad puns later."
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're just completely invisible after that.
Yeah.
So they start scaring people, and pretty much everybody in the city believes that there are ghosts walking around, except for one, that being Mr. Krabs.
Who's the only one, apparently, who isn't scared of ghosts.
And despite saying that, it shows that he's prepared just in case a ghost shows up. Like, he has this anti-ghost armor, not sure where he got the idea for that. He's got a paddle ball, which somehow is supposed to fend off ghosts. But soon after he's like, "Bring it on," SpongeBob and Patrick show up. They start scaring the crud out of him. And it seems to work, at least for a while. But then Mr. Krabs throws a bucket of water at them, which exposes them, because as it's established at the shop, the one thing that makes the spray wear off is getting wet. So after he exposes them, literally, because they don't have clothes on at this point, he's like, don't worry about it, guys. I'm hip. I'm all for a good joke every once in a while. But it turns out that's just his prank, because shortly after he says that and they start to leave, he puts a spotlight on him, and suddenly the entire town is inside the Krusty Krab to gaze at the embarrassment.
Yeah. Payback.
But there is one thing about this final moment in the scene that I think it might just be an oversight in the animation, because as everybody's cheering, you have a brief moment of Sandy whistling, and not like just using her lips. It's one of those types of whistles where you put your finger and your thumb to your mouth and then whistle. But I think it was an oversight, because in order for that to work, she would have to be reaching through the glass of her dome in order to pull that off. Maybe it was a visual gag or one of those things where they just abandoned logic for a joke. But to me, I think it's just one of those things where they weren't really thinking at the time. But it's okay, because it was still funny, the payoff was incredible, and that's how Season 3 ends.
Yeah. And I've said before, that a part that I really like, when there's this montage of people screaming, "Ghosts! Ghosts!" And it's like, and then somebody says, "Toast!"
I love when they do stuff like that. It's like, yeah, he kind of knows what he's doing, but he's just like, yeah, I got a piece of toast.
Yeah. Now, honestly, I'm not that acquainted with the stuff of Season 4, as far as I know. But, I mean, I could probably say a little bit about the movie, though.
Yeah, we could do that if you would like. It is a little bit after, like, 8:15. Do you want to get into the film, or do you want to save that for its own episode?
Yeah, let's just try and cover it real quick right now.
Okay, sure. So, the movie is, as we've established a couple times, it was supposed to be how the entire show would come to a close. It was supposed to be the end of SpongeBob. That was it. And the big plot of this movie is SpongeBob is seen as a kid, even though he's technically an adult. And he goes on this crazy journey trying to get King Neptune's crown, because Plankton's big plan, his plan Z, is to take the crown, frame Mr. Krabs for it, and then have him executed so that he ultimately wins. And in the process, he's enslaving the entire city.
Yeah, and the opening is pretty fun because it's a crew of pirates doing an orchestral arrangement of the show's main theme song, which is fun, gives a nice little theatrical vibe, and I like theater, so. And there are a handful of famous names in the cast for this movie as well. The King Neptune is voiced by Jeffrey Tambor, whom is probably best known for his work in Arrested Development. His daughter Mindy is voiced by a pre-Marvel Scarlett Johansson.
And of course you got all the usual characters. Since this movie was originally supposed to be the finale, they tried to take some time to showcase all of the big stars of the show. Like, of course, you have SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Squidward, Mrs. Puff even makes an appearance, Gary.
Yeah.
They're all there. I know a lot of people were confused with King Neptune because we'd already seen him earlier on in the show. And then this one looks completely different, so people weren't entirely sure if this was supposed to be the same King Neptune or a different one, especially since later on in the show's lineup, the original King Neptune design shows up again. So that just added to the confusion more.
Yeah. You could probably make the theory that's like King Neptune the first and second, whatever, but yeah, it does seem a bit inconsistent with the King Neptune from the first season, with the different design, different voice actor. But
and there are some very subtle hints in various episodes that kind of hint that there are, or at least there has been, more than one King Neptune. Yeah. But we weren't sure if they went with this design just for the movie or if there was some other reasoning behind it. But this movie in general is probably amongst the closest Plankton has gotten to winning. Like, he almost takes over the entire city, which he would probably turn into taking over the world at some point. But he enslaves almost everybody while SpongeBob and Patrick are out trying to get the crown back. And they literally get there with the crown at the last possible moment before Mr. Krabs would have gotten executed.
Yeah. It's like, I think, if I remember, it's kind of dragged out, kind of like climactic scenes, like specifically the example of the movie Good Burger comes to mind, where something is as close as it can be to happening, and they kind of drag it out, and then just in time, the very last second, it stopped.
And if you really think about it, a lot of the pressure they had to get back on time was Patrick's fault, because SpongeBob stalls King Neptune long enough for him to agree, okay, if you are back here with my crown in 10 days, I will not execute him. Yeah. But then Patrick comes out of nowhere and goes, he can do it in 9. And they go back and forth, lowering the amount of days they have until it gets down to 6.
Yeah.
But as they go on this journey, which is what the movie focuses on for the most part, they meet a few crazy people. One of the most notable being like a hitman or assassin type character that Plankton hires to take them out, named Dennis. And this guy is serious business. He runs into a lot of the same people that they did as he follows them and deals with them a lot quicker. Like, for example, they run into these stereotypical, like, hillbilly gas station guys, and they're there for a hot minute. But when Dennis shows up, he literally rips their lips off. And then when they go to... It's very much like the Salty Spittoon in a previous episode, where it's this very shady, bar-like place where all these tough guys hang out. And they barely get out of there alive, because as it's established when they're in there, it turns out that if somebody blows a bubble and they know who it was, they get the snot beaten out of them. But they barely managed to survive because when they were playing a song that they very much love, someone else in that room started singing it, so they all thought that this was the person who blew the bubble.
Yeah.
So they get out of there. Eventually Dennis shows up, and all he does is give a single uppercut to the leader of the group, and that punch makes him land on the boat where the bar is, and the whole thing collapses.
Yeah.
So they're setting up this whole thing like Dennis means business.
Yeah, Dennis can be pretty intimidating. He's literally got spikes in his boots. And at one point, when SpongeBob and Patrick are riding on David Hasselhoff's back, like, you can see him lifting his foot up. I think maybe he stomped it, maybe he didn't. I was kind of waiting to see, like, Dennis stomp his foot and David Hasselhoff, like, scream or something, but that never happened.
Well, when they're on David Hasselhoff, as SpongeBob and Patrick at this point have the crown and they're heading back to the city, Dennis does approach them, and he doesn't use his boots, but he does use a knife that he ends up hitting Hasselhoff in the butt with.
Yeah.
But he doesn't realize what's going on, so he's just like, "Ooh, take it easy back there, fellas."
Yeah. Right.
The moment where he uses the spiked boots is when they're still underwater heading towards Shell City. And he's about to stomp on them when then he gets stomped on by an even bigger boot, which belongs to the quote-unquote Cyclops, which to us is just your average scuba diver. But that scuba diver is the owner of Shell City, which turns out to be a gift shop.
Yeah.
To us, it would look like, oh, cool, they have all these different creatures and using them as like props and whatnot. But to them, it's very morbid, considering what he does in order to get that to happen. So they eventually seemingly die in a way, because he dehydrates them to the point where they become completely incapacitated. And the only reason they come back is because right before that happened, they each shed a single tear that went down a wire, lit a spark, caused the sprinklers to go off, and that revitalized them. So it wasn't even Dennis who got close to permanently taking them out. It was as they put it, the Cyclops.
It's not as violent an image as that Tea at the Tree Dome episode where you see the SpongeBob shrivel up to the point where he looks like his eyes are droopy or he's wrinkled up or something, but it's intense enough.
Yeah, the Tea at the Tree Dome version is definitely the less appealing looking when he's getting dehydrated. But of course, with this one being from the movie, they try to make it seem a lot more impactful, like this could very well be the end of SpongeBob.
Yeah.
But after they get the crown out of there and they have everybody else that is now revitalized in that shop fight the scuba diver, the Cyclops, they then leave, and Hasselhoff shows up out of nowhere, Baywatch style,
Yeah.
and says, "I'll take you back."
Yeah.
So as they do, that's when, of course, Dennis shows up, still attached to the boot that stomped him and squashed him. And as Dennis tries to fight them off, he eventually gets hit by a little Doc in the face, and that's the last we see of him.
Yeah.
But now that they've dealt with him, they still have to race back to the city, and they have to find a way to get down there because they're running out of time. But Hasselhoff uses this really weird and kind of disturbing technique where his chest kind of, not like splits, but his pecs kind of separate, and then he uses that to launch them like a slingshot of sorts back towards the city, and they eventually do get down there right in the nick of time.
Yeah, and there's some other famous names in the cast, like Antonio Banderas, who I know from like Spy Kids and Shrek, Puss in Boots franchise, and I think he also came back for a later SpongeBob movie. And Thomas F. Wilson, who probably best known for his role as Biff in the Back to the Future franchise, and later provided the voice for Patrick's dad on the Patrick Star Show spinoff.
That's another thing we haven't really talked about too much with the SpongeBob franchise, is that they get a lot of special guest appearances in there. Some of them in the same episode, but every once in a while they'll have a whole episode where one big celebrity shows up. Like when they did the Atlantis SquarePants special, the leader of Atlantis was voiced by David Bowie.
Who later contributed some music to the Broadway musical.
That's true.
Yeah.
So he's associated in that way as well. I didn't even consider that at the time.
Yeah.
But of course, that's just one example. They also have had people like Johnny Knoxville. They had Johnny Depp. They had Betty White at some point. And just so many others.
Oh, Amy Poehler.
Amy Poehler, for sure.
Yeah.
Of course, considering that Merman Man and Barnacle Boy weren't there constantly, you could consider them guest appearances as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of other ones. It's just trying to think of ones off the top of my head. In any case, after they do get back to save Mr. Krabs with the crown, it seems like everything's going to be just fine until Plankton's like, nope, I'm not letting this happen. So he uses one of his hypnotizing buckets on the king, and things are starting to turn south again.
Yeah, basically these buckets like turn people into like kind of plankton zombie slaves.
Yep, they're completely mindless, and all they're saying is, all hail Plankton. Which kind of terrified me when I first saw that, but, you know, it was supposed to be at least kind of unsettling. But as things are seemingly on the brink of going completely downhill, SpongeBob then proceeds to make a speech. And it's like, yeah, I'm a kid, and you know what? I'm okay with that. And as he gets more intense, Plankton tries to stop him, which fails because then SpongeBob just goes into this really intense rock song that, with the power of his new guitar, helps free everybody.
Which, for you older people, it's basically an adaptation. It's set to the tune of the song I Want to Rock by Twisted Sister. And it's the lyrics, the chorus is essentially the theme lyrics of Goofy Goober.
Yeah, they call it Goofy Goober Rock for those that may not know the official title. But that ends up saving the day. And one of the plot points we didn't really talk about too much is the reason. Like, we talk about how SpongeBob was viewed as a kid. And this is a problem because he wanted to be the manager of the new Krusty Krab building, which was set next door to the other one. But Mr. Krabs didn't give the job to him, despite how good of a worker he is, because, as Mr. Krabs put it, he's just a kid. So he wanted to prove that he's a man, which he succeeded in doing, and the movie ends with him getting that position. And the end of the series was supposed to be him jumping up in the air saying, "This is the greatest day of my life!" But it definitely was a good movie. I actually have a fun little story, if you will, and it's very brief. When this movie came out in theaters, my family and I think one of my brother's friends, we all went to go see it, and I believe it was at Tinseltown. The problem was, one of us, I think it might have actually been me, left the car door open even after we all went inside, and none of us realized. And it was snowing out at the time. So when we came back, it was super cold inside that car, and it took a few solid minutes to start warming up again.
I don't know. That would probably concern me, but probably not as much as the idea of somebody sneaking in and taking my registration.
If this happened nowadays, I would have been a lot more concerned. But back then, I think things were
right. Well, it's not your documents. It's your mom's or dad's.
I was about to say, I was a kid, so I wouldn't have realized the full scope of how dangerous it was. But actually, one thing I meant to mention near the beginning of when we started talking about the movie is, before it's announced who the manager is, SpongeBob is fully confident that it's him. And one of the examples he uses to show that, he's probably going to be the one picked, is because he goes, "Well, let's just ask my 374 consecutive Employee of the Month awards." Now, of course, this is another one of those visual gag type things, but if you take that ever so literally, 374 consecutive months means that SpongeBob, at that point, between when he first joined the Krusty Krab in episode 1, leading all the way up to the first movie, that would mean that in that time, SpongeBob had been working at the Krusty Krab for 31 years. Which is absolutely insane. But again, probably one of those visual gag things.
Yeah, how could you pass on him?
But of course, as we said, Mr. Krabs doesn't give it to him because he's still viewed as a kid that SpongeBob then tries to disprove throughout the rest of the movie. And even though he eventually comes to terms with it, he's still given the job.
Now, the assuming he's going to get it, it's kind of like what I hear happens a lot, like in the NFL draft, which kind of coincidentally enough is actually, I think, coming up in a couple of days.
Yep.
Teams will call and say, if no one else takes you first, we'll take you, and then they never do it.
Yeah, that's kind of a scummy thing to do, where they give somebody false hope.
Yeah.
Mr. Krabs didn't necessarily do that. That was more just like SpongeBob building himself up only to get disappointed. But that does happen a lot in real life, where somebody will be built up and they think they have something in the bag, and then the rug is pulled out from under them.
But and the SpongeBob movie, I believe, was running in theaters the same time as The Incredibles, which again I rewatched last week.
Huh. Yeah. Like, I know season 3 came to a close based on my IMDb information around the middle of 2004.
Yeah.
but I thought The Incredibles came out in 2005.
Nah, it was released November 2004.
Huh. For some reason, I kept thinking it was a year later, but...
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That does check out, because they were making a point about how the sequel came out 14, 15 years later.
Yeah.
And now they're making a third one. Who knows what will happen there?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens.
I am too. I'm not holding my breath too much, but I've got my fingers crossed. I am hopeful, and I'm seriously hoping it's a good one, because Disney does not have the best track record right now with remakes and sequels.
Yeah. But anyway, that's pretty much the what's considered the I guess peak era of SpongeBob, and so I guess that'll wrap it up.
Yeah, that's the original run of SpongeBob. Obviously, even now they're still going. All these years later, I'm sure they're going to try and make it stretch out to at least the 30th anniversary if they can.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to stop covering SpongeBob and go back to a bunch of other things, because we do have a good list that Seth put together.
Yeah.
Of different things that we'll be taking a look at.
Yeah. In the meantime, stream us as you want on YouTube and YouTube Music, and tell us your thoughts about SpongeBob, anything, and leave some comments.
Yeah, let us know. When it comes to the original run of SpongeBob, including the movie, what are some of your favorite moments? Do you have a favorite episode? Do you have a favorite song that they sang in those first 3 seasons? Or just what are some of the moments you quote with your friends the most? As Seth and I discussed, one of the most quotable things that we keep coming back to with our friends is the scenes from Band Geeks.
Right.
And maybe it's the same for you guys, maybe it's different. But let us know, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you next time.
So long, everyone.